Hello, welcome back to my channel. Please subscribe to my channel, like my videos, and please check out my channel for other updates. So the last update about Twist of Fate. Ranbir almost slapped Prachi because Prachi says that she doesn't want to give birth to Ranbir's baby. And Rhea wants to go on honeymoon with Ranbir and Ranbir agreed. Let's continue. Ranbir tells Rhea that they should go to Manali for honeymoon. Rhea says, I will surely come. It is my favorite hill station. She says, I didn't expect that you ask me, and says, I will come whenever you say, and says, thank you, I am so happy. Pallavi asks Rhea. Rhea thanks her. Ranbir says, I was thinking to go far from home, and says, I will get some time to spend with Rhea. He says, we will plan family during this time. Rhea opens her mouth in surprise and stunned. He says, I will book the best suite and the best room. Pallavi, Aliyah, and Rhea were so happy and surprised. Ranbir says, I know some romantic places in Manali and I will book the ticket as well. He thanks Pallavi for her suggestion and then looks at Prachi and goes. Grandma and Shahana get upset. Prachi looks on unaffected, but she gets hot hearing Ranbir proposing Rhea to come to honeymoon with him. Shahana comes behind Prachi and says, why did Ranbir ask Rhea to come for honeymoon with him? Prachi says, I don't know, and asks Shahana to ask Ranbir. Shahana says Ranbir said this in anger and says you made him angry and hurt him. Prachi says, why do you think that I have hurt him? Shahana says you both are the same. You have hurt him and now he is hurting you. Prachi asks Shahana to be quiet. Shahana says, I know that even you are very hurt and you don't know why you are hurting him. She says you are hurting yourself to hurt Ranbir and asks Prachi to think about the baby whom she is hurting. Shahana says, Prachi, you and the baby will live happily once you tell Ranbir about this baby. Prachi says, I don't love Ranbir. Shahana says there is something else in your eyes. Ranbir comes there and says she is saying the truth and says it was my misunderstanding that she loves me and have me in her heart. Ranbir says, I used to think that Prachi's eye speaks it all, but your sister broke my illusion in the morning and clarified everything. Shahana says, at least you don't say this. Ranbir says the book which you are reading has changed its covers. Shahana says the cover might be changed, but the book is the same as well. She says if you can't do good, then don't hurt each other. Ranbir says I did not hurt Prachi. Prachi says he has hurt me and gave me pain without any intention. Ranbir says whatever I did was in anger and says whatever Prachi said today, my soul is hurt. Ranbir says if the soul is hurt, then what would happen? Ranbir says I see the page in my cupboard where my 3 dreams are written. He tells them about his dreams and says his 3rd dream was most important to him, and Prachi said that she never wanted to become my baby's mother. He says she said that she cannot bear the burden of my baby all life and said clearly that she doesn't love me so much and she cannot love me and my baby. Ranbir thanks Prachi for helping him in his first 2 dreams and says I am going to fulfill my 3rd dream with such a person who wants to be my baby's mother happily, who loves me so much that she will make my dream as hers, who understands the value of marriage, family, and most importantly, love, which you don't understand. A song plays in the background. Ranbir walks away from there. Prachi cries and asks Shahana. She says, I can fight with Ranbir, but I cannot see him with Rhea. My heart breaks whenever he stands with her. She asks what to do. Rhea says, thank you so much. Rhea thanks Pallavi and says, I want to fly with Ranbir now itself. Aliyah says, I never saw my Rhea so happy. Rhea says Ranbir gave me this happiness by himself and says I was stressed during our marriage and I was afraid that Ranbir will not marry me or that if Prachi will come. She says everything is fine now. Ranbir wants to go with me to Manali. She says memories will be good now and she thanks Pallavi. Pallavi asks Rhea to save some energy for packing and says I will book your booking in the best resort of my friend. Rhea says I thought Ranbir would refuse, but you convinced him. She thanks them again. Pallavi says enough and asks her to go and do the packing. Aliyah says, I didn't expect Ranbir to agree. Pallavi says, I can sense something wrong. Aliyah says it is good. Pallavi says it is too good to be true and says maybe I am overthinking. Aliyah asks her to book the suit. Grandma comes to Vikram and asks him to make his son understand. Grandma says if Ranbir have honeymoon with Rhea even once, then Rhea will become his wife and then it will be impossible for him to return to Prachi. Vikram says the mistake haven't yet been done and says I know him well and says Ranbir will go with Rhea but he will realize his mistake. Grandma says when Rhea realized that Ranbir has Prachi in his heart, then she would understand that nobody can take that place. Grandma says Rhea knows very well that Prachi is in Ranbir's heart but then also she is convinced. Vikram says that Ranbir thinks that he can live without Prachi, but he will realize that he cannot live without Prachi and asks Grandma to think good and says good things will happen. Prachi tells Shahana that she knows that Ranbir agreed to go for the honeymoon due to her. Shahana asks Prachi to clear her issues with Ranbir and says that I know whatever you said was in anger and lied that you don't want to be his baby's mother and that you don't love him. Prachi says I lied to divert his attention and says I know what I said. He shall not be doubtful that I am pregnant. Shahana says it is not Ranbir's dream that he wants a baby, but he wants a baby with Prachi and he wants to have any relationship with Prachi. Shahana says, why are you hurting himself less and hurting yourself more? What kind of revenge is this? She says all your life problem can be solved. You just need to say the truth. Prachi says I cannot risk my baby's life. Shahana says Ranbir is the father and he will love him a lot. Prachi says it is Ranbir's habit. He will love him and then he will leave him. She says, what will I do if he leaves the baby like leaving me? Shahana says Ranbir will not leave his baby. Prachi says I am getting punished for my doings. Now nobody can do anything. Ranbir is going away from me. Prachi sees Rhea packing her stuff happily. She walks away from there and stumbles. She sits and checks her sandals heel. Ranbir comes there and looks at Prachi. He comes inside Rhea's room and says, hi, beautiful. Rhea says, I didn't know that you want to go on honeymoon with me, and thanks him and says, I love you. Ranbir says, until when I can keep myself away from you, and I know how much you love me, and I should give some happiness to you. Prachi hears them. Rhea says it is like a dream. Ranbir says it is like fulfilling the dream. Rhea says whatever happened is good, and our relationship is being taken to another level, and it was like I was behind you and it was one-sided. She says, I really love you. I really do. Ranbir tells Rhea that he had 3 big dreams, among which 2 is fulfilled, and 1 is remaining. Rhea asks, what is your 3rd dream? Ranbir asks if you don't want to hear about the starting 2 dreams. Rhea says if they are fulfilled, then what is the use? She says, I promise that I will help you to fulfill your last dream. Ranbir says, my 3rd dream and most important dream is that I want to become a father. Rhea says that is so sweet and says it is every girl's dream after marriage, but I am liking it that it is your dream. She promises that she will fulfill his 3rd dream and his dream is ours. She asks Ranbir. Prachi gets upset and goes from there. Ranbir thanks Rhea and says I will leave. Rhea asks him to do the arrangement and says the booking is done. Ranbir goes. Rhea asks God to make her Ranbir's baby mommy and says just as this good news come, Prachi has to go away from this house. Prachi cries and sits on the bench. Shahana comes there and asks, why are you crying? It all happened according to what you want. Prachi says, I never wanted whatever is happening with me now. She says, I thought that I will break his heart and I will hurt him, but I do get affected if he gets hurt. Prachi says, when I hugged Ranbir on Lorry Day, I felt strange peace and I felt that this is the moment for which I have come and I want to be in his embrace and I felt like I have won the world. She says, when he slept on my lap, I felt the same peace. Prachi says, when Ranbir asked me if I am pregnant, I lied and I made fun of his jokes and broke his heart and said that his dream never mattered to me. I never wanted to start a family with him, never want to be a mother of his baby. She says I lied and says I wanted to have his baby and I want to stay with everyone happily. Prachi says when Ranbir is with me, I feel that he shall be with me always, and when he is away, I want him to be away. She says I want to tell him that his big happiness is with me, but my foot is held back due to my past. She says I couldn't forget the past, then how will I forgive him? Prachi says I couldn't stop Ranbir from going to Rhea as I couldn't forgive him and says I want to fulfill his dream, but for that I have to break my dream. She says I cannot take the risk and says my dream is my baby. Shahana says don't tell him the truth, but stop him from going to the honeymoon. Prachi says I don't want to stop him and says I will see what is written in the destiny. Prachi comes to her room. Rhea is sitting on her bed and Rhea says same room and same bed. Do you remember anything? She says even you were sitting here on my wedding day and asks if she is shocked. Prachi says no, as you copy me and says you don't know anything original, even if it is marrying Ranbir. Prachi asks Rhea, what are you doing here in my room? Rhea says I have given this room to you to stay, but you snatch it and you have set this room as per your choice. She says you started wearing my husband's favorite colors clothes and says you will get room and bed like this, but you cannot get husband like my husband. Rhea asked Prachi not to woo Ranbir and not to do any drama as he cleared in front of everyone when he was treating your foodborne and you have called the police. She says he cleared it that he had done this for me and said that you might have blamed me that I have made that burning wood fall on your foot. Prachi says yes, you have made the burning wood fall on my foot. Rhea says that is why Ranbir said it, that you would accuse me falsely. She says do whatever you want and says Ranbir is mine and asks her to have shame and leave her sister's house. Prachi says you should feel ashamed to eye someone else's husband and says though you were married to Siddharth, you were still eyeing Ranbir and you tried to trap him and stoop too low to get him. Rhea says I stoop low, but I am standing with my head high now as Ranbir is mine now. Prachi says if Ranbir is yours, then why are you so scared even after his declaration? She says you are scared of my moves and you are fearing that you cannot woo him even in honeymoon. Rhea says I am not scared. I am just warning you that he is mine and asks her not to come to their honeymoon location like a psycho heroine. Rhea says to Prachi that you have seen our marriage and asks if she will watch their honeymoon too. She says Ranbir wants to become mine fully and asks her not to become a villain in their union and says don't think that I will let you spoil my honeymoon and I will not let you even for your reflection on him. Rhea says to Prachi that you wanted this room, so be here, you got what you wanted. She asks her to stay with her ego and let her live in Ranbir's love. Prachi says do you really think that you love Ranbir? Rhea says I love him since you haven't come in his life. Prachi says say whatever you want, I am not interested in your talks. Rhea says I am going to celebrate the wedding night with your husband and asks her to get her name written outside the room for happiness. She says what did you say? That I copy you, and says I will do something original which you couldn't do. Rhea says to Prachi that very soon you will get the news that Ranbir is going to become my baby's father and says you might have seen the dreams but I will fulfill it and says I am original. She says Ranbir and my honeymoon bed is booked by mommy for us and says do you see the difference? When you got married, you were thrown out and when I got married to him, I am going for honeymoon. Rhea says to Prachi that mommy will throw you out from here soon. Prachi says I don't care where you go and asks her to go for the honeymoon. Rhea says this is called grapes are bitter if not reachable. She says you have no quality to become anyone's wife, but you have the talent to snatch someone else's love. Rhea says to Prachi that it is not your mistake. You have done whatever your mother has taught you. Prachi shouted at her and says enough. She says she remembered her mother's teaching and values and that is why she is silent. She says if you say further, then I have to remind you about Jita's learning, where Krishna asks Arjun to fight with his relatives. Rhea asks if Prachi's mother taught her to threaten. Prachi says I told you that I will not hear anything against my mother. She says you are flying high about honeymoon and you have lost your senses and you are cutting the wood on which you are seated. She says nothing would happen between Ranbir and you and it will be like a normal night. Prachi says I will make sure that Ranbir and you will never celebrate wedding night. Rhea says you can try, but you will fail. Prachi says if I do this then. Rhea says I will become your servant then. Prachi says it will not be fun and says I want to see your head down. She says I will not let this night become your wedding night. Rhea tells Prachi that your challenge and so-called relationship would end after tomorrow night and says after Ranbir and I spend the night together, then you cannot show your face to anyone, as Ranbir will not only become my husband, but he would also become the father of my baby. Prachi says if you think like this, then you have lost the challenge already. She says if you wanted, then you could have gone with him peacefully, but after this challenge, you will not get even a peaceful moment with him. Leave the night. She says Ranbir would never be yours. Pallavi tells Aliyah that she is very happy. Aliyah says you were not much happy on your wedding night like this. Pallavi says their rituals were not completed and finally their wedding will be complete. She says that Vikram told her that Ranbir was drunk and he had gone there to sleep. Aliyah says very soon, Ranbir will make you grandma. Pallavi gets happy. Prachi asks Rhea if she haven't heard. Rhea says when your God stops listening to you, then you think that your last support is gone too. She says everything will change after tomorrow and says didn't you notice that mommy booked ticket for Ranbir and my honeymoon as she doesn't regard you as this house daughter-in-law. Thank you for watching my videos. Please don't forget to like my video, share it and please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.